But before I before I leave the stage and leave it to people who know what they're talking about, I want to tell you about my latest obsession, which is medieval visual art. This obsession started relatively recently when my boyfriend sent me this picture of death of Philip of France, a king who died after his horse tripped over a pig. And it led me down a massive rabbit hole of looking at pictures like this and just trying to figure out what the hell is going on in them. And to introduce you to this kind of art, I picked my 4 favorite types of medieval drawings and paintings. So in no particular order, let's start with terrible deaths. Now, the thing about medieval art and death is the people who are being killed usually have very sort of calm expression. So, you know, we have this person here being roasted, and he's just sort of, you know, everything's all right. Here, King William being shot by an arrow. He doesn't look happy, but he doesn't look particularly in pain. And this was my favorite, Apollonia being tortured with her teeth being pulled out by 2 people at the same time. So, terrible death, torture, but everything seems to be really cool. Lovely animals, and some not so real ones. Now, this is brilliant because it seems to me that a lot of medieval artists were painting animals that they've heard of, but never actually seen. So here we have a brilliant example of an elephant and 2 monkeys. Some, of course, were not totally real, but this unicorn, I think, is a brilliant example. Cats catching a mouse, and then a mouse stealing some wafers, which is also beautiful. And this must be my favorite, an owl. Second quarter of 13th century owl. Next chapter, creepy babies. Now I do apologize because I think some of you might dream about this later tonight, so I'm sorry. Here we go. Excellent 6-pack on this one. This, I don't know. So, a bit weird. Another one, like, yeah. And my last but broadest category is people, possibly demons, doing weird stuff. So we have this knight fighting a snail on a branch. This lovely lady tickling someone with a feather. We have this humanoid rabbit making pizza, potentially. This is great. This is half squid, half human, slapping someone on their butt, on a branch again. And the one without which any kind of investigation into medieval art would not be complete is, there's one more, sorry. A woman with a dragon in bed. This is actually from the history of Alexander the Great, so he's being conceived here. But the one I wanted to mention particularly is the person playing trumpet with his butt. So when you look into these manuscripts, they are called illuminated manuscripts, and they tend to have very religious nature. So it's kind of, you're looking at this and you're like, what happened? What happened? How did we get from, as a humanity, how did we get from this to this within just a few hundred years? Did we forgotten how to draw, or what happened? But actually, it would be really easy to dismiss this whole period as the Dark Ages and say, the humanity declined, and to an extent it would probably be true. But there are actually really interesting artistic reasons why the art, the visual art of this period looks the way it is. So first of all, art in the early medieval times had very different purpose than during the classic period. So when you compare the Roman and Greek statues and frescoes, they're very realistic. They celebrate nature, they celebrate the human body, because at that time, art was to be looked at and admired. It was something beautiful, right? Whereas in the medieval times, the purpose of art has changed. With the fall of Roman Empire, fewer people were able to read and write, so literacy declined, and the main purpose of art became to tell stories mostly of Christianity. So all these drawings were trying to convey quite complex stories about morality and what's right and what's wrong, and the meaning behind the paintings became much more important than the form, which was really important in the ancient Rome and Greece. There was with the rise of Christianity, there was also a new focus on spirituality and the non-material world and death, which is why so many of these drawings and paintings depict death and in quite violent way. It was meant to convey emotion, it was meant to spark fear in people and form their sort of behavior and the way they saw the world. Oftentimes we saw some examples of inappropriate behavior and what would happen if you behaved that way. So because it was quite rude to depict people doing that behavior, we see a lot of animals. So snails fighting knights and things like that. There's more allegories and symbolism, again, compared to ancient Rome and Greece, where art was what it was for beauty and it depicted the human form and nature. We are now a lot more into allegories and symbolism, which brings me back to the amazing trumpet played by the butt. That's actually from Dante, right? The artist of all artists in medieval times. He has the same motive in his works, in his Divine Comedy. So, oh yeah, and that's the creepy baby explanation, which I love. Basically, in medieval time, the only baby people drew was baby Jesus. And at that time, people believed that when Jesus was born, he was fully formed human. So that's why he was already old man when he was born. And then once people started to get more custom art and people started to have family portraits, they started to want to have their babies being painted in a way they looked, not in a way they will look in 40 years. So after that period, we see suddenly like the pretty babies, the angelic looking babies. So if you want to learn more about this, the British Library has absolutely fantastic medieval manuscript blog, which has, I warn you, if you go onto that blog, you will spend hours just looking at manuscripts and finding weird stuff in them. And other national libraries also have digitized manuscripts. And yeah, I mean, look at medieval art, it's great. It's not as horrible and bad as people think, and I definitely think it's not a dark age for art.